What's up, guys? This video is so there are three levels of consciousness, basic levels, right? This is kind of like big categories of consciousness. We're going to go over the first level, which is essentially what they call lower consciousness. All it really means is I am unaware that I am unaware. So there's just no consciousness, just means awareness. And when we are unconscious, we are unaware, right? And the question is like, what then do I need to become aware of? And that is the awakening process. It's becoming unaware, it's becoming awakened to the things that I am unaware of. Now, generally, what you need is a bunch of triggers happening in your life because you can't become aware of something you're unaware of. So you need external things in your life to be able to mirror or trigger or show you. This is why being in relationships is so critical. Even if you're in a relationship with your garden, right? Or for me, it was my relationship with my horses. You cannot help a horse become something you are not. So all I can do is help my horse become something that I already am. Well, when I started working with horses, kept thinking my horses were shitty, and turned out one of my horses. My horses were just responding to the relationship and the environment that I was creating for them. Environment overcomes intention. So for you to be able to reach your intention or achieve your intention might be to heal, but your environment will always outperform your intention. So what that means is that you have to put your intention into your environment so that you become your environment. So if the environment is naturally an environment of unawareness, which is the natural state of humans, then it's going to be really, really impossible, essentially, very unlikely that you will ever awaken to what you are asleep to without having the environment to support the awakening process. Those are your relationships, those are your daily routines, those are your beliefs, the way that you communicate and talk to yourself. There's lots of things that we can do to be able to put our intentions into our environment. If we're unintentional about our daily routines and our environment, well, then that's what's supporting the unawareness that's going on in life. You get the point. And so let me pull this up. I actually want to do a presentation on this, and you all should be able to see this. Here we go. Okay. So it's understanding the reasons why we blame and shame. It's really about how lower consciousness uses facts to blame. That'll be one of the key points that we talk about. Dr. Gabor Maté says the fundamental assumption is that most people and most of us live lives that are largely unconscious, and we don't know what is actually driving us, driving our behavior. And the idea being that if we become aware of what's actually driving us, then we can make decisions that are not driven by dynamics that we are not actually aware of, but can we actually be free? And his premise is no, because awareness is just around intellectual insight, that you have to have additional things. And we'll talk about those additional things. But I thought this was like a really interesting point that he's making, right? Most of us are unaware. So much so that according to Dr. Bruce Lipton, 98% of our behavior is driven by the subconscious mind. Well, the subconscious mind is driven by the subconscious beliefs. And he wrote a fantastic book called The Biology of Belief. And if you haven't read that, you got to go get that and get started. He also did a podcast by Commonwealth of California in 2011. I'll put the link down below. And that podcast is like 90 minutes long or so. And it's essentially the summation of his book, The Biology of Belief. And the book is it's pretty heady in the science stuff, but you're smart enough, and we've got enough tools in here to be able to help you walk through that. Dr. Carl Jung also said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So we have to become aware of the things we're unaware of that are actually driving us. So if you ever find yourself just being like, this is just life, this is my fate, um, you're being driven, you're just unaware of what is driving those pattern behaviors, what are the beliefs that are driving the behaviors. Jesus also said, lose yourself and you find yourself. And, I put the little brackets in there because I think what he's saying here, I believe what he's saying is that you have to lose the egoic self to find the highest self. And the egoic self has to integrate into the highest self. And when we're unaware, the egoic self is actually who's in the driver's seat. Dr. James Hollis said, the greatest gift to others is our own best self. So how do we become our best selves? Well, we have to become aware of all the parts of us that are not our best self. And, that's a terrifying, frightening process. But, well, you're courageous enough to do it. Shit, if I could do it, you can do it. Trust me. Eckhart Tolle also said, and I think this is just a really good thing to kind of like try to make peace with this whole process of becoming aware of the things that are actually driving us. And there's we've talked about this before in some of the other videos, like there's some grief that comes when you become aware of the things that you were not aware of. He says, don't look for peace, don't look for any other state than the one you are in right now. Otherwise you will set yourself up for inner conflict and unconscious resistance. Forgive yourself for not being at peace. The moment you completely accept your non-peace becomes transmuted into peace. Anything you accept fully will get you there, will take you into peace. This is the miracle of surrender. Now, Bruce Lipton also said something. I didn't put it in the presentation, but Bruce Lipton said, peace, his definition of peace is when you are in harmony with everything in your environment. That means you're not trying to control anything. You're not trying to coerce anything. You're not trying to manipulate anything. You're not trying to get your kids to break up with the boyfriend or whatever it is. You're being in harmony with it. Now, being in harmony doesn't mean surrendering doesn't mean like throwing up the white flag and your hands in the air and just walking away from it. That's not surrendering. Surrendering is actually leaning into it without trying to control it. And that takes skills and it takes resources. That is not a head game that you play. That's not just a mental, intellectual process of going through that. There's intellectualism, there's spirituality, there's insight, there's philosophy, there is a tremendous amount of skills that go into being able to surrender. So as easy as this sounds, there's definitely a transformation process that has to happen and a philosophy that has to weave all those things in so that we can properly surrender. And we've got modules and courses on that. There, the three levels of consciousness. The one we're going to really focus in on is the left. It's the lower. This means that the ego is in control. Now, just think of the ego as your inner protector. Your inner protector is Paul Blart, the mall cop, who thinks he's a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret. It's like he's doing the best that he can do. And when this ego death, right, is not about getting rid of the ego. It's about understanding the ego and befriending it, and then becoming aware of when the ego is showing up, and so that when it does show up, it's not able to drive the vehicle, right? It's not able to drive you and control you. It's that you can say, oh, there you are, and now I'm going to consciously choose something different. So there's name calling, there's complaining, blaming, shaming, there's codependency. These are all lower states of consciousness, but that's not bad. That's extremely normal. That's extremely understandable once you can understand the premise of why it's happening. So James Hollis says there is no illogical behavior. So shaming someone is a behavior. Being codependent is a behavior. There's no illogical behaviors once you can understand the premise of the beliefs that are driving the behavior. So in lower consciousness, here's a couple ways to be able to gain a little bit of awareness of it. There's victim mentality. We see ourselves as powerless. We believe that life happens to us rather than for us. We're in dualistic thinking, right? Versus wrong, good guy versus bad guy, right and evil, superior, inferior, us, them. There's opposites in all things. This is a law in physics, that there is an equal and opposite reaction. That's always happening. We live in the realm of duality. However, with our consciousness, we can transcend dualistic thinking. So if you're just looking at this stuff and you're like, there's a good guy and there's a bad guy, there's a villain and there's a hero, just know that that's just dualistic thinking, and it is driven by lower conscious unawareness. We also react from fear. They did a really interesting study. They put the Bible text in a computer analysis system, and they gave it the prompt and said, what is the most common message in the Bible? And it came back, do not fear. And there was a bunch of different renditions of that. So we react to life events with fear, frustration, blaming others for circumstances without reflection on my own role and contribution to the circumstance. Fear is a positive emotion that is saying to you, something I care greatly about is at risk. So fear is, when you have fear show up, if you view it as an emotional messenger, then you can just say, you can slow it down and pause and say, well, what is it that I really care about right now that I'm afraid of losing? And if you can pause and slow that down, that's a tremendous skill set to have. And then we also need a lot of external validation. So we look to others for approval, or our self-worth is in the hands of societal standards, trends, peers, acceptance, finances. There's a million different ways that we look for external validation. The more external validation that we find ourselves needing is due to the absence of internal validation. So that then leads us to, I've got a core wounded belief about myself. I'm unaware of it, hence it's lower consciousness. It's below my awareness. In lower consciousness, people are disconnected from the true message of their emotions. So we have a module where it goes through the 14 core emotions and what their message is to us. That'll help you develop emotional intelligence, meaning the intelligence of the message that the emotions have for you. And it also externalizes pain. So when I'm in pain and I'm in lower consciousness, I'm going to externalize my pain and make it your problem. So you did this. This is your fault. I'm not blaming. I'm just stating the facts. I've said that to a lot of people. I've heard people say that to me. This is all lower conscious thinking. And the more we become aware of it and what's actually driving it, the more compassion we are filled with. And then when the compassion comes, we get out of judgment. And then we say, yeah, that was done, but that clearly was the best that you knew how to do, because otherwise you would have done something different. So we start infusing it with compassion. This is what Jesus is saying, right? Is like, he who is without sin cast the first stone. So it's really all about consciousness. The ego is fully obsessed with the self, and yet it has no true sense of the self because it's not aware. Ego is the protector, the inner protector of the things that we are, our wounds and our beliefs about ourselves that fragment us from our true self. And so it is obsessed with protecting that, but it has no real awareness and understanding around it. Dualistic thinking is just lower consciousness. The mind sees the world in terms of right, and kind of talked about that. But this creates a rigid perspective where blame feels justified because I am in the right and you are in the wrong. Therefore, I can punish you. Now, the thing that's so interesting is that we live in a culture and a society that justifies punishment rather than positive reinforcement. So what I what I punish, I'll get more of. What I reward, I'll get more of. Uh, there are two different ways of being able to attempt to accomplish the same thing, except for punishment never does. Also, we live in a culture and in a society that really pays a lot of attention to forgiveness. We pay it a lot of respect. All of us want to be a forgiving person. You know, I say all of us, like people who are deeply wounded feel so unforgiven, and their pain drives them to feel like this is such an unforgivable place. So therefore, they don't want to have forgiveness. That's just coming from deep pain and deep wounds. But the general majority of us are not in that much pain. And so, we're always telling our kids, like, hey, forgive your little brother or forgive your friend. And we're telling our spouses and we're asking other people for forgiveness. Forgiveness, the etymology of the word forgiveness means to completely or thoroughly give up the right to punish. So if you feel justified in blaming and shaming and judging or punishing another person, okay, that's just the state of consciousness that you're in, but you don't have forgiveness and when you say, nope, I forgive you, but you've paid your dues, that's not forgiveness, because the true essence of forgiveness is to thoroughly and completely give up the right to punish. Now, I'm not saying that you should just become a doormat, because you have to have healthy boundaries. And what I'm saying is that we need compassion to be able to create a society that can repair the ruptures that are being created. And we do that through positive reinforcement rather than punishment, because that creates a more safe environment. We'll go deeper into that, and we can dive into that in our one-on-one sessions. There's also the projection of pain. Our unhealed wounds create blame because we don't know what to do with our pain. So then we project it out onto the other person and their behavior, and then we accuse them. The Hebrew word for Satan, it means the accuser. And so when we're accusing somebody else, it's because we're in deep pain and we don't know what to do with that pain, and we don't know how to have healthy boundaries to be in healthy relationships. So we got into a painful relationship because we have a painful relationship with ourselves, and we might be totally unaware of that. So you always attract what you are. See, there's some philosophy that's going into healing and some spiritual teachings that have to go into healing. It's not just like bypassing and drinking some ayahuasca and then running around with fucking crystals on your forehead and, speaking love and light. Yes, that's a part of it, but you can't bypass this stuff. So people in lower consciousness project their own unresolved pain onto others, making it easier to blame others than to face their own inner wounds. There's cognitive dissonance that shows up as a self-defense mechanism. When actions don't align with my image of myself, wanting peace but reacting with blame, right? So I've got this thing that I want, peace, but then I accuse other people. That's cognitive dissonance, and people justify their behavior by convincing themselves that they're just stating the facts. So when I am out of alignment with what I truly want, there's a beautiful video of forgiveness where this man who committed like egregious violent crimes against multiple families, they all stood up at his hearing, and they took their pound of flesh. And then this guy, the last guy, stands up and he says to the to the criminal, he says, sir, you make it very difficult for me to practice what I believe. And he said, and I know that a lot of people here have like are making you pay your pound in flesh. And he says, but I just want to let you know I don't hate you and I forgive you. And he's like, what you have done. Now he had murdered this man's one of this man's family members. So there's no cognitive dissonance between what that guy actually believes and how he's going to practice what he believes, and that'll put you in some like really big wrestles. So cognitive dissonance, it's a very natural, normal human thing to do, and it is just a mechanism to defend the self, because the self is feeling so much internally. We're feeling so much pain and we don't know what to do with that. So what it sounds like in lower consciousness is, I'm not blaming, I'm just stating the facts. This is your fault, not mine. We're equally to blame. That's another way that I'm just being honest, right? There's no compassion in any of that. So higher consciousness is always rooted in forgiveness and compassion. So you just have to decide where you want to be. And then the healing is to being able to make the transformational shifts from lower consciousness to higher consciousness. And as we're shifting from blame to awareness, we recognize when the ego is acting to protect. That's what it does. It's the inner protector. And take responsibility for your emotions, meaning these are mine, these are not yours. It's triggering inside of me. It's going boom inside of me. It feels big inside of me. And I don't need to project that out onto everyone else. And then the practice of self-awareness and compassion. So that's how we can start to shift that. And awareness is the key to peace. To truly live in peace and contentment, one must first become aware of their ego and their emotions, their feelings, their thoughts, their pattern ways of projecting their beliefs onto someone else, their intentions, their perceptions onto someone else's intention. And then self-awareness transforms the need to blame once we can start getting there. But then we start coming to that closer to feeling peace and being in harmony with everything in our environment. So hope that all makes sense. This is really big stuff. If this is like, if there was something that triggered you, this is an awesome thing to talk about. And these are things that we can't just intellectualize. We actually have to have a somatic experience of where it feels safe enough to be compassionate, to not need to blame. And we can work through that and go through a compassionate inquiry of, what might be coming up for you. Again, what's so interesting is that when I was in, and I still am, like I still fall into lower consciousness, right? I still blame and shame and do all that stuff, but I'm just aware of when I do it. But when I wasn't aware of when I was doing it and I was hearing about these things, I mean, I was really judgmental about this stuff because I was trying to protect myself, because this, feels like, well, somebody like this is an asshole. Nope, this is just the human experience. There's nothing to fix. It's only becoming aware of what we're unaware of, and then having forgiveness with self, compassion with self, aiming towards peace, right? To be in harmony with everything in our environment. And if that's the life that you want, well, then transformational levels and shifts in consciousness are just around the corner. Okay, hope this video makes sense. Again, as always, leave a comment in in the comment box, and we'll see you in the next video.